amazing individual. He's from New York. I'm going to read you a little bit about him. His background is extensive. He has so much to contribute to our great republic. And so I want to make sure and not leave anything out so that way you can get all of the details. Now, one thing I found interesting was about our guest was Dan DeBono, that's his name. He has a quote on the top of his website, and it just rang true to my heart. The quote is, "To protect and enhance the liberty of the individual American citizen." Dan DeBono, I mean, that says it all right there for me as a patriot, as a mother, as a woman of God. It just says it all. But I'm going to read you his bio right now. So Dan, he was born in New York. He's a lifelong resident of Northport, New York, where he was raised. This beats true to my heart too, because many of you know my background. He was raised by an extended Irish-Italian family of teachers, cops, and nuns. Dan and his two brothers all served in the U.S. Navy during Gulf War I and Bosnia. One sister is an intensive care nurse, and the other sister is a speech pathologist in public schools. He has a servant family with servant hearts. They want to help the public. It's just amazing. So Dan, he first volunteered for military service in 1986 through the Navy ROTC program. During his time at Holy Cross, he was greatly impacted and inspired by the military events in Panama in December of 1989. Dan was selected for Navy SEAL training after college. He was class leader of Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training Class in 173. While Dan was a class leader, he jointly set the Class 2 mile ocean swim record. That man has stamina. He has heart. Dan was assigned to SEAL Team 2 in Virginia Beach, Virginia. He completed one tour overseas during the Bosnian War. He conducted numerous joint training operations with NATO allies and specialized in joint special warfare submarine operations. After his military service, Dan attended the University of Chicago's Graduate School of Business. Yes, he's a businessman, ladies and gentlemen. He earned high honors while receiving a master's degree in business administration with a concentration in finance. Dan spent 20 years in finance and investing, and now he runs a small investing and advisory firm in New York. Wow. Welcome to the show, Dan DeBono. Thank you for coming into the Erin Cruz Show. This is extensive. I mean, I've read about you. I've read the interviews. I've read what Fox News has to say about you. I've read what the pundits have to say and everything else. I mean, but what you put on your website says it all. You're a family man. You've put your life into service for our country. You've continued forward. I mean, you're involved in the Republican Party. You're conservative. I mean, tell us what drove you to run for U.S. Congress.
Erin, thank you very much for having me on your show.
Of course.
It's my honor to speak to you and to your audience, and I sincerely appreciate that opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's right. After my service in the Navy, I did spend 20 years in finance. And what I discovered when I looked around, and when you're working in finance, you really it's a job with a lot of hours and a lot of intensity, and you really have to focus just on the job. And I think towards the end of my 20-year period, I realized what was happening to Long Island, which is my district. And Long Island has a serious set of challenges. And what I saw was a region with population stagnation and wage stagnation. Right. And I coupled that with the personal experience of 4 of my 5 siblings that you mentioned moved away. And the sad thing is that the job opportunities on Long Island were lacking relative to the cost of living. So I decided that, it's a place that I love. I've been there my whole life. I've been around the world and been in other places for periods of time. It's one of the most beautiful places in the country. It's a beautiful geographically. It has fantastic education systems. It should be a magnet for families. It should be a magnet for entrepreneurs, but it just wasn't happening. So I decided that I was tired of seeing my loved ones leave. And I want to protect my Long Island and protect my country.
Right. Now, a couple of things. in case I really didn't go into it too much in his bio, I know we kind of glossed over it. Dan is running for the 3rd Congressional District in New York. New York is one of the most liberal states. It's similar to California in that it's like an exodus in some areas for many because they can't afford to live, and the areas are suffering. But he's running in a place where there's a lot of liberalism, and the person he's running against, that's a whole nother story. So Dan is a great contrast for that because, I mean, what your financial background is, Dan, accompanied with your conservative and I'm sure fiscal conservative views and positions, it's going to aid us tremendously in the House of Representatives because where do we, all of our financial bills start? They start in the House. We need people with good financial sense. So where do you stand in contrast to your competitor?
Well, Erin, you brought up a very good point. New York is more liberal than a lot of the interior of the United States, and in many ways it's like California, in which you have these fringe groups moving farther and farther to the left.
Yes.
In my case, the 3rd District of New York, it's a little more than 30 miles wide, and it extends from about halfway out on Long Island into parts of Queens inside of New York City. And as you go from east to west, the district goes from pretty hardcore Republican to pretty hardcore Democrat. And it's one of the districts that they call a swing district. So because of that demographic on Long Island, voter registration is relatively balanced. This particular district, it does have a Democratic advantage, but it's within the range of error in which I have a very good chance of winning based on the demographics alone, never mind the contrast of my messages, which I'll get into as well.
Right, which I was looking at, you do have an incumbent that you're fighting. That makes it a little bit of an uphill battle, but I believe that your messaging is strong. And I believe that with the whole walk away movement and people shying away from that crazy progressive left mentality and realizing I'm a Democrat, I can't identify with that maybe anymore. We need strong fiscal, policies, and laws. We need people in the House and Congress that are going to work for us. The people, even though we have a majority in the House right now, there are still a lot of people there, like the incumbent in your district, who may not be serving the populace there. And I think that with your messaging, you can win. I do believe that. So tell us a little bit more about what you were going to go into before I cut you off about I do that it's a conversation, it's a process, but tell us a little bit more about your platform and your messaging, because that's so vital right now.
Here in Long Island, what is happening is we're losing the middle class, and we're losing the middle class not just in Long Island but in many parts of the country.
Yes, we are.
And my message is primarily an economic one, which is to strengthen the middle class in terms of jobs and in wages. And where I really differentiate myself both from my opponent and from many of our existing leaders is I have a very deep understanding of the economy, employment, and wages. And that's from my 20 years that I spent on Wall Street intensely, 15-hour days for years and years and years or longer. What's happened to Long Island is threefold. We've lost hundreds of thousands of middle-class jobs over the last couple of decades. Some of the reasons are ones beyond our control, but I'm going to address the ones that are within our control.
Right.
So when people try and piece together why is the population stagnant, why are we losing our young people, and why is our family size catastrophically shrinking? And again, this is a phenomenon that's not just occurring here.
Right.
And among the reasons are what you often hear referred to as globalization. So what globalization really means is a reversion to the mean of labor costs. And labor costs in much of the developing world, where we've lost millions of jobs to, are around $2 or $3 an hour. And at the same time, there's also no environmental restrictions, and there's no health and safety.
Yeah, and sometimes it's higher than that. I mean, there is a large disparity, and it has to do with regulations.
That's right.
And so...
Well, not just it has to do with treaties as well. And one of the things that you've seen the president seeking to address is the loss of 8 million manufacturing jobs over the last 20 or so years. Now, some of those jobs are lost because of a cost differential, but other jobs are lost simply because there's limitations on the amount of goods that the United States is allowed to sell to other companies. You see this most often with China. There's simply a cap on the amount of goods we can sell. And it's not just a tariff. Tariffs are a big part of the problem. And as I heard the president explain today in one of his appearances, often we're charged 10% to sell goods in another country, and we only charge them 2%. So one of the goals, one of the goals of his work on tariffs is to even the playing field and have what he's terming and what I think is appropriate, fair trade. Free trade is a very, it's an ambiguous term. We want fair trade. We want our jobs back. We want to put American interests first. We want the American class to be
America first. I love it. I love it. America first. Fair trade, free trade. It doesn't matter what you call it. Whatever we do, it has to make sense for America. What other country would not put their country first? Would not put their countrymen first? Would not put their people first? Would not put you as a family man. You put your family first. You have to think to these things, and it's not it's not uncommon, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be doing it.
So that's when you hear all this noise in the news about the trade war, there's a really good intention behind the tariff. Get back millions of American jobs, and yes, there's going to be some winners and losers along the way. But on balance, at the end of this process, the United States is going to be tremendously better off. And by the United States, I mean the American middle class. And that's something you also have to be aware of. When people talk about the country or the economy or us or oftentimes they're not talking about middle class wages and jobs. Oftentimes they're referring to the profits of what I call stateless multinational corporations who have no loyalty to the United States. The point of the tariffs are to bring back jobs to the United States and to restore some of the 8 million manufacturing jobs, for example, that we lost over the past 25 years. And the president's agenda is America first, which means the American middle class first, which often is at odds with the goals of what I call stateless multinational corporations, whose goals are to find the cheapest source of labor internationally and could care less if they destroyed every single American job if it meant profits were going to go up. But we cannot have a situation where we have no middle class. We need to have a middle class, and we need to put the interests of the middle class first.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And, we've seen this issue in California as well. And like you said, it's a national thing. It's not a New York thing. It's not a Long Island thing. It's not it's across the nation. And it's frightening. Quite frankly, it's frightening, and it's really motivating that we have a president in office who wants to take action, and it's also quite frightening that we don't have the people in place in the United States Congress that actually want to put America first and take the actions.
What you have in Congress is you have a lot of fear, and a lot of congressmen on both sides of the aisle, I call them corporate Republicans and corporate Democrats, they're essentially bought and paid for by these stateless multinationals. And our entire campaign finance system is broken. What you have is these stateless multinational corporations giving tens of thousands of dollars of campaign contributions to congressmen on both sides of the aisle.
Right.
And then
it's a big issue.
It creates this state of fear. The congressmen, the leaders that we've elected to represent us, they don't act in our best interests often. Right. They often act in the interests of these big corporations, and it's not in sync with the American middle class. And people don't understand why the politicians are not working on their behalf, and the answer is because they're bought and paid for. And you see it on both sides of the aisle, and I think it's a big flaw in the system.
It is. So are you hinting to the fact that you want to see more campaign reform?
Absolutely.
Campaign finance reform? I've seen that. I ran for United States Senate against Dianne Feinstein, and just watching the money pour into and even through the races that are going on right now that aren't for the U.S. Senate, watching the money pour in for different angles from different people, it's frightening. And it gives them a massive edge, but it also means that they're going to be beholden to these people. So what do you see in terms of campaign finance reform?
Well, let me just say we have a representative democracy, and yet as you look back over the past 20 years, I would challenge you and anybody else to point to me one piece of legislation that was passed in favor of the middle class that big corporate America was against, and I have not been able to find anything. Often they'll often couch legislation will get passed, and it's often couched as being to the benefit of the middle class, when in reality the middle class will get pennies on the dollar as to the benefits of big multinationals get.
Right.
And the reason, as we just talked about, many of the politicians in power get money from the companies that they're supposed to, they're tasked with overseeing.
Right.
And no wonder nothing ever gets done. If you've gotten $30,000 in donations from a big multinational contractor, when it comes time to looking at how that company is regulated and what rules and requirements are there, you're going to take it easy on them. There's just no way around it. There's no possible way you can take tens of thousands of dollars and look at these companies objectively.
Right.
So
no,
I expect to happen, I don't have high expectations. What do I think is the right thing to happen? There should be caps on acceptance of corporate money.
Right. So yes, because it is one thing to have this kind of idealist perspective of what you'd like to put forward and put up for adoption, but it's quite another trying to get it through the process and actually even get it on the floor and get it to the point where it could even be conceived as an option. But I think that it's about time for people who are elected and put in the House of Representatives, especially when it comes to some of these financial bills, to start putting things forward and to start watching these politicians start voting these things down, start denying them, start kicking them, start pushing back. Because right now we just seem to have a clique of people who, like you said, they're serving certain groups and it's just not serving the American people. And I agree with you wholeheartedly about stripping the corporate contributions, in the sense that we do live in a representative republic, and the people, that's where it's at. And I know corporations are viewed as persons in some sense, but
yeah,
I believe that
a lot of times things are legal, but they're really not right.
That's absolutely the case, and that was what I was going to say. Is just because it's legal doesn't make us right. Just because there's a loophole doesn't mean you should use it. Gray doesn't mean green light.
Well, here's where it also happens. There's the right way to address this problem, right, which is through introducing more competition and through right-minded politicians refusing these contributions and behaving in more of an ethical manner. And there's the wrong way. There's the progressive left way. There's the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez way, which is simply going to be massively excessive taxation and wealth redistribution. So what I urge, fellow like-minded patriots and middle-class Republicans to do is to join with me on campaign finance reform before it's too late, before we're taken over by these left-wing lunatics who are simply they're not going to respect property rights, and they're going to seek massive wealth redistribution.
Right.
We need right by the middle class the right way before it's too late.
Absolutely. And we're getting to that edge point right now where I see that a lot of the Republicans even are leaning left, and in a direction that's far less conservative than what I believe most of the middle class would think is sanity in as far as the legislation is concerned. Now, okay, so I have a question. I want to know, where do you stand on term limits?
I'm a strong believer of term limits. When I see people on TV in both parties who've been there for 30 years, their message starts to get drowned out, and I realize they're there for their own survival. They're not there in the public interest. They're there, and everything they do has one goal: to get reelected, and they're not serving the American people. So I'm a strong believer in term limits. For the House of Representatives, that should be something around 8 years. I'm negotiable on what the number is, but my sense is politics is a temporary public service that people should perform. Get in, have your voice heard, and get out.
Right. Now, I know many of the people that follow the Erin Cruz Show, they're in firm support of term limits. Most people are. They're just tired of that politician being reelected. And I think that'll help get rid of our problem with the big purse. Part of kind of a campaign reform type issue would be, taking away that thing of, okay, this person's been in there 25 years. Their purse is huge. Their ability, their name recognition is huge. They can just get reelected over and over and over again. And when you take that term limit and you put that there, that's a cap. That's done deal. We have term limits here in the state of California, up in the Assembly, up in Sacramento, and we're just starting to see a little bit of the fruit of that, although it hasn't really flourished quite as much as we'd like to have at this point. But I have great hopes for it, and I think in Congress it would do wonders. It really would, because decades is just terrible. So now, for those
of both sides, it's on both sides.
Oh, it's on both sides. I would have to say, Dan, from where I sit, and I'm not sure if you agree with me, but where I sit, we've had control in the House for some time now, and we're not seeing, Obamacare hasn't been repealed. There are some things that haven't been adjusted. I mean, we have a Republican Congress, and they excuse themselves because they have this seat or that seat, and they're just a small. I mean, they come up with every reason and excuse in the book. Many of these people have been in there for years. So if they're
the behavior of some of these Republicans is despicable, and I'll name a few.
And I love the Republican Party. I love.
It's despicable. They come up with every reason. I think they're trying to be cool and be accepted by the cool kids, which is the media. But they've betrayed their constituents. They've betrayed their principles, and I can't wait to see them leave their positions.
Well, and they run on platforms, right? And so that's why I ask very specifically about your platform, and we want to know where you stand, is because we want to know exactly where we can hold you to the wall, Dan, once you're hired for the job. But that's the important part, is when somebody says they're going to do something, your name is your word. Your word is your name.
But the other thing, Erin, people are afraid of, if the people, they want to stay in power. But if your ideas are good enough, then you should have no issue with relinquishing power, so to speak, or your role as an elected official to the next person. And if your ideas will outlive you if they are good ideas. And if they're not, you don't deserve to be there anymore. So that would solve, having term limits would solve a lot of our problems. But also, we're not getting people with enough backbone in Congress. We need a new level of quality of leaders in Congress.
Patriots, not politicians. And I believe that comes from being a regular person in the regular world, having lived a regular life. You have a family, you have your business world, you have your background, but you're grounded. You're grounded in the sense that you have strong morals, strong values, and you're not going to yield. You're going to stick to your platform. Now, Patriots, not politicians. The other thing is veterans. I believe veterans like yourself, because you were in the U.S. Navy, play a large role. You have a perspective that's vital, especially with some of the issues that we deal with, with the Congress and different committees that are there. Having that perspective is important as well. And you have the full package. You really do, Dan, and I commend you for your run and what you're working towards. Now, I read in your bio on your website that you worked on 2 presidential campaigns. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So you're very involved with the political process at home. You have been for some time, and you've seen kind of the dirty end of it, and so you want to make good of it. But what has that lent you as far as experience to be able to do the posturing that you need to get done, to maneuver through Congress? Because it's a sticky swamp up there.
It is a sticky swamp, and you have to believe that you have enough backbone and principle that you're going to stick to your principles once you get elected. And I have absolutely no doubt in my mind, I cower before no man. Nobody owns me. I represent the people that I was elected to. I will represent the people that I was elected to represent. Right. I don't belong to any special interests, and I quite often will talk against the special interests because what I think they're doing is often wrong. And one of the benefits of being a veteran is you have this perspective of true service. Right. And it's not just me. It's the way that you're raised by your parents, and it's the experiences that you have as a military man. It's true public service. And in my case, it wasn't just me. It's my entire family. It's my brothers, my father, my grandfather, people who weren't in the military were police officers. It's true public service with an aim of helping people.
Right.
There's no other motive. I have no interest in staying in Congress past my 8 years or whatever we determine the right term limit is. I want to get in. I want to have my ideas widely disseminated, and these are ideas that can be carried on by other people. They don't.
That would be the idea, right? I mean, that would be the only point of putting forth legislation, is to have it become law. And I've always been from the standpoint, I've been an activist for 10 years. And what I've seen just as a regular person is that we have so many laws already, Dan. I mean, there's so many laws on the books, and they're either not being enforced, or they've manipulated them or used loopholes. What I would like to see, and I'm sure many of the constituents in your district probably also would like to see, is that you work towards refining the laws we currently have, not just continue to legislate and legislate and legislate and legislate and pile law upon law upon law. And what do you think about that angle?
I think what you're speaking to is when President Trump began his term, one of the ideas
I love Trump.
One of the ideas he put forth was that for every regulation that gets created, 2 regulations need to be eliminated.
At least.
I think it's a fantastic idea. The code in the United States is thousands and thousands of pages. It's ridiculously complex, absurd, ununderstandable, and selectively enforced, which is why we have the immigration problem that we have, because previous executives decided not to enforce certain laws. So we have to, whatever we have must be enforced. But what we have is too complex. It must be simplified. And I think that the best government is the least government, and government you can barely see. Government's role is very limited.
Right, absolutely. I agree with that.
It's a system in which to operate, and that's it. And the power of the individual is the best power that exists, and that's the structure of society that'll maximize the benefit for all.
Right.
So
I
regulation is another part of my strengthening the middle class platform. It's bringing the jobs back, but deregulating so people can more easily create new businesses. The new business formation rate right now is the lowest. It's towards the lowest end of the lower end of the range, and toward the lowest number it's ever been. And that's because of years and years of overregulation by Obama. I mean, what he did was so destructive. The amount of regulations that there exist, the licensing authorities, the capital requirements, the jurisdictions, the work rules. These are just absurd, and they've crushed new business formation, which is another reason that wages have remained stagnant. Right. So that's another part of my platform is to continue the good work that the president has been espousing on deregulation.
So you support Donald Trump?
I support Donald economically. I support him 101%. His ideas to put the American worker first are second to none. That's what all of us should be doing in any position of leadership. America is based upon having a thriving middle class. We've lost a thriving middle class, and the president's ideas are intended to restore that middle class to vitality. From tariffs, deregulation, trade deals, absolutely, I support them completely.
Absolutely, that's wonderful.
And you're starting to see the impacts of these things. And what's interesting is you hear noise from the establishment on both the left and the right, which makes me more confident that what the president is doing is the right thing. The more the Wall Street Journal squeals about the damage, the more that I realize he's doing the right thing. Because
you've got that right. The more they squeal, the better we're doing.
They're squealing right now, and they move from thing to thing to thing, from one tragedy to the next, which are all basically fabricated. But the bottom line is he's working on behalf of the American people. And what's many people don't realize, though, is the interests of the middle class worker are not necessarily aligned with the power in this country, right? And one of the objective measures that people often use to measure the quality of the economy is the stock market. But what I will say is that I tracked for a period of my career, my focus was on mergers and acquisitions, and what I track is what happens in the stock market when there's a corporate merger or consolidation. And what a corporate merger and consolidation is often based on is layoffs. They call them synergies, but it means how many people can we fire? And what you see on Wall Street is the more people that can be fired in any particular deal, the more the stock market celebrates. So it's kind of an interesting phenomenon in which the price of a particular company's stock is not necessarily reflective of the well-being of its employees in the American middle class. And I think what Trump is doing is working on behalf of those middle class employees with these tariffs. It's not necessarily going to be the profit maximization tool that big money would like it to be, but its goal is to help the American middle class, and sometimes those things are at odds. So we have to be aware of that. And what you hear from the establishment press is, it's going to crush the economy.
Right.
But here, semantics again gets very tricky.
It's delicate, and we have to think long term. We can't always be looking just to the moment.
Remember, when you hear the word the economy, Erin, we have to help our economy. Often what they're referring to is the corporate profits of these multinationals that have no loyalty to the United States. They're not talking about the middle class. You or me and our neighbors They don't care about what the term the economy. They care about, do they have a job? Do they have enough money to pay their bills? And those are not the same. And you'll hear people try and trick you into talking about them as if they're one and the same. And they'll say, Erin, we need to lay you off so we can maximize profits. So it's good for the economy, don't we? And many people will basically hear that argument. They won't say it that explicitly, but that's what they're saying. And with these tariffs, that's what they're saying. They're saying, oh, we have to keep profits high because it's good for the economy, which means we have to destroy your job and send your job overseas.
Right.
There's a lot of semantics and trickery in reporting and the way
smoke, mirrors, whatever is good for their narrative and their position and their agenda. And I think it does come down to agenda. And I've been watching just since Donald Trump took office, and the media is out of control. And I love when he tweets and he hones in and gives the American people information direct. Of course, maybe it's not totally comprehensive, but it's enough that the American people can get a glimpse and then look at what the news is saying and watch the pressers and really get the idea of what's really going on. Nunes, he was put out today that, was it last night, that he was having trouble getting information out, proper reporting out. He gave a statement to the press wouldn't put it forward, so what did he do? He went on Twitter and he said, I gave a statement to the press refuses to print it, here you go, American public via Twitter. And I just think to myself, these big corporations, these conglomerates are not working for the American people. They're working for their agenda. They're working for their pocketbooks.
Now remember the way.
So we need you, Dan, to talk. When you get in office, you need to talk directly to the people, because we don't want others to control the dialogue.
Yeah, but remember now, corporate America, they are supposed to work on behalf of their shareholders. I don't blame corporate America. Who I blame is our political leaders who are supposed to be working on behalf of the American people. That's the disconnect. Corporations and the way that a capitalist economy is, they're supposed to act everybody should act in their own self-interest. But political leaders,
I'm not saying that corporations are bad. Okay, that was not what I was trying to say. They've helped build America. I mean, most corporations, many older corporations, in fact, started very, very small with just a man or just a woman, and they've grown and grown and grown and grown and grown. That's a good thing. We're not going to complain about that. But I do get the whole shareholder thing and everything else. It's just a concern when, these interests start controlling the dialogue, the legislation, and other things from outer means. So,
I will say, with regards to the media filtering the message, one of the reasons that the media and the establishment is so up in arms about the president is because they cannot filter the message. In times past, this is really the first president that did not have his communications with the American public filtered. Maybe a little bit of Obama, because the internet was more ubiquitous, throughout Obama's term. Right. But Trump now was the first president who doesn't need the media to spread his message, and therefore they don't get to spin it, and they don't like that.
They don't like that.
They're largely cut out of the process in many circumstances, and they don't get to falsify the message the way that they want to falsify it in line with their liberal ideals, which is out of touch with most of America.
Now I have a question, and I agree with that. Well out of touch with the most of America, very, very much so. But I do have a question about lobbyists. Now, President Barack Obama, I know you're running for Congress, but President Barack Obama ran on this whole thing. We need to put an end to the lobby, the power of the lobby, and all of this. And what did we see? Really, I almost saw more lobby, if you will, which is a huge concern. But where do you stand on that kind of influence, as it relates to the U.S. Congress and the work that you'll be doing up in D.C.?
Well, I can tell you that I will be spending more of my time with regular people than I will be with lobbyists. And one of the problems with political leadership is they spend all their time listening to rich people and to lobbyists. They don't spend any time really listening to regular people. So no wonder their legislative decisions are wrong. They need to make time to talk to regular people. I don't think that big money should have anything more than their equivalent time share of how many people they represent, right? So one man, one vote should equate to the same amount of mind share in whispering to a politician's ear. But that's not the way the system is now because of the whole the infection of the system with cash.
Yeah, but that's good to know. Now, one more issue that I'd like to ask you about: immigration reform. We touched on that just a little bit before, putting America first and supporting Donald Trump in his agenda to put America first. Where do you stand on immigration reform, and in terms of those people who suddenly think that they're here, they should be legalized, receive citizenship, and also visas like H-1B visas, workers who are here, specialized workers where employers are abusing the laws. They're using a lot of loopholes to bring in people. Where do you stand on a lot of these issues?
These are very important issues. And first I'll say that one of the platforms of my candidacy is to protect our Constitution. And that includes everything from freedom of speech, right to due process, right to privacy, right to bear arms, and it also includes the right to have a sovereign nation with a definable border.
Right.
The fact that we have a border that's easily penetrated is just mind-boggling to me. It wouldn't take a lot, and of course we should absolutely have a border that is not easily crossable. So,
right.
With regard to immigration, I'm married. We're all immigrants at some point, right? Whether it's first, second, third generation.
We're talking legal immigration versus illegal immigration. There's a large distinction between the two that the media likes to blur that line. There is no blurring available. Legal, illegal laws.
One of the differences, so boiling back down to my race, the 3rd Congressional District in New York, my opponent does not believe there is a difference between a citizen and an illegal immigrant when it comes to working. So he believes that any illegal immigrant should be allowed to work wherever they want, which obviates the need for any kind of immigration restrictions, because we're not going to distinguish between citizens and non-citizens. Then any kind of immigration rules or restrictions or limits are completely unnecessary. So I believe that there's a difference between a citizen and somebody who's in this country illegally.
Yes. Go ahead.
With regards to immigration, I look at it through an economic lens. So what I was going to say before is I'm married to an immigrant. My wife came to the United States as a Latin American immigrant when she was about 10 years old. She didn't speak English. She learned, she didn't get a check every month when she got here, and she didn't get housing, and she didn't get medical care. She came here with her mother, and they were both living, barely out of poverty, and they worked their way up, and they followed the rules. And she went through the process, and after about 10 years, she ultimately became an American citizen, and she learned to speak English. There's a right way and a wrong way to enter this country. And I will say that there's a billion people around the world who would like to come to the United States. We need to have a process in place. We need to have a framework that we adhere to. We can't just
have a process.
Well, it's not.
We just have to adhere to it.
That's right.
And then we have to close the loopholes which are being currently abused and manipulated by, I would say, politicians, other interests, as well as those people who want to come here. And of course, they're looking for opportunity, but they're not doing it the right way. Now, you say illegal immigrants. I say illegal aliens. They are not immigrants to our country, as I view it. They're alien. Yeah,
that's right.
But in any case, these illegal aliens, I don't believe that I don't even believe that you see them as bad people necessarily. They're just people who've made wrong choices.
Well, remember, there's billions of people who are depressed or distressed and have lost hope from wherever they live, and they'd like to come here.
Right.
We need the right process, but the process must be followed. The reason we have 11 or so U.S. consulates, or I'm not exactly sure what they're called, but we have 11 of them in Latin America, is for people to apply for citizenship or apply to come to visit.
Absolutely.
That's the process that's in place. People who come to this country who show up at the border undocumented or illegally should be instantly turned back, and that would have avoided this entire problem with what you had with the children being separated. I'm not sure why when somebody comes to this country illegally, we don't just say no. Imagine if somebody comes to your house, you don't open the door and say, come on in, and then, fill out an application over the next 5 weeks while I feed you and house you. You say, get out of it. You say, no, you're not welcome. You say, go down and apply the right way. And that's the way that my family did it. It's the way that my wife did it. It's the right way to do it. So,
right.
But I look at immigration through the economic lens, and there's a humanitarian aspect to it. There are people and I would say that the top of the list is people in Yemen and South Sudan and other parts of Africa where there truly is genocide. If we're going to take people in for humanitarian reasons or for asylum purposes, there's a long list of countries that come ahead of really what we've been servicing out of convenience, which is much of Latin America. But what we have to, so from an economic point of view, we take in about 1 million legal immigrants every year. And who knows what the number of border crossers who come in illegally, tens to hundreds of thousands. We look at the wage growth in this country. We look at what's happened to the middle class and the 90-something million people who are out of the workforce. We do not have the capacity to absorb that many immigrants into this country anymore. We need to have immigration reform that includes a hard look at how many immigrants this economy can absorb without continuing to depress the wages of other working and middle-class Americans. When you take 1 million people a year, you drive wages towards zero. And the only thing that prevents them from being at zero is our minimum wage laws. With 90-something million people out of work, don't you think, you see these men who show up on the streets looking for day work. They would take 2 cents an hour. They would take 5 cents an hour because it's better than where they came from. But we that's a poverty wage. We simply cannot absorb those people into the system, which is why we have to really figure out what's the right number. It's no longer 1 million. It's something much smaller than 1 million.
Well, I definitely do agree with that perspective. I view it from where I'm standing, from the viewers on the show. And let me just catch people up real quick. This is Dan DeBono. He is running for the 3rd Congressional District in New York. He's talking to us about his platform for U.S. Congress. He's talking about many different issues, but right now we're talking about immigration. And the way many of our viewers here at the Erin Cruz Show and online view this is that, we just, like you said, we can't absorb, that many people trying to come here for better life. It's not that we don't want to allow for the potential for opportunity. But here's the deal. The numbers need to get capped. The caps should go down because, and like you said, there has to be a strong, objective look at how we can go about maximizing or minimizing and maximizing the entire process. Because I'll tell you, between the H-1B visas and then the other individuals that we bring here, it's a really big issue. For example, you have an H-1B visa person that comes here to have a specialized job. They can bring their wife. Mm-hmm. It goes out from there, and many of those people work towards then, after a certain period of time, working for and towards permanent residency, working towards then and for citizenship. And then we have chain migration, which then they bring family who bring family who bring family. And so it's not even just the people we let in, it's the people we let in who invite more people in. And it's just a butterfly effect, and it's a concern. It's a concern for many of the people who voted for me here in California. It's a huge issue. It's something where now, like you said, where are the jobs? We have people at McDonald's who are 40, 45, 50 working, used to be a high school job, what you got part-time just to, make your way. So I think it's a large concern, but your idea, your plan is to say, let's really look at this. Let's dial in.
Let me tell you how the system is corrupt. Okay, the situation in America today is that wage growth has been stagnant on what they call a real basis, which is after accounting for government measured inflation.
Right.
And what that really means is the government statistics are doctored. Okay. Government understates the level of inflation on a regular basis. It's in their interest to do so. They make all kinds of crazy substitutions when making these quantifications. I don't think it's not far from the mainstream on the right to believe that the inflation statistics we hear are doctored. Inflation.
And then they're given to the media, which then are fully puffed out and made to look like some sort of pretty thing.
We know that the cost of living has gone up a lot more than 1.5% to 2% a year for the past 10 or 20 years. But even using those doctored low estimates, let's say the number is 2% a year. So what that means is the government steals 2% of your purchasing power every year. So over 10 years, you lose 20% plus some compounding. Over 20 years, you lose 45 to 50% of your purchasing power using that government statistic. In reality,
right.
If you believe inflation or the changes in the cost of living are higher than what the government is telling you, you're losing a lot more purchasing power. But even with that, wages have been, on average, flat for 20 years. And one of the reasons is the way that the free market system is supposed to work is that there'll be a job that needs to be filled. An employer will suggest that we'll put out an offer for that job. Say, Erin, I'll pay you, $11 an hour, which is the minimum wage here on Long Island. I'll pay you $11 an hour to do this job. And you may say, you know what? I have children who I need to take care of. I have a mother living with me. I can't. That's a poverty wage. No, I'd rather wait and sit back and make that employer raise the offer. Okay, right. So it's where supply and demand meet. Ultimately, if there's somebody else who steps up at that level, then the price will be set. But what's been happening in the United States is big corporate employers have gotten, I don't know how they've gotten it, but they have this sense of entitlement that they should have an unlimited supply of workers at minimum wage. There's no constitutional right. That the way the system is supposed to work is Americans should sit back and say, no, I will not accept a poverty wage. I will sit back and starve for 2 weeks so I can force you to raise that 11 to 12, 13, 14, a higher number. But what's been happening is big corporate America and their crony bought and paid for politicians, they then do an end run around the free market by saying, oh, Americans won't take these jobs. And the answer is no, Americans would take those jobs, but Americans won't take these jobs at poverty wages. But then the big corporate America, they say, we need to take in 100,000 people on H-1B visas, or we need 100,000 immigrants, and those people will accept poverty wages because it's better than where they came from. It's an end run around. It's not the way the system is supposed to work.
And I think that part of it too, having the background that I have, is part of it is they're easy hires. It's difficult in that, there's a visa process, but they also get a committed employee. They know that person is going to work for them. I mean, on an H-1B visa, for example, they know that person, they bring them in, that person's going to work for them. They're going to stay for that job. They're going to want and like that wage. And it's a secured situation. Whereas, someone else, they may get that job, then get a better offer and go. I mean, that's another risk. There's a lot to it, and I understand it's completely complex. But,
certainly that is possible. But I think more often than not that when you hear the phrase that Americans won't take these jobs, so we need to import.
That kind of dialogue. I do believe that Americans will do those jobs. Unfortunately, these corporations are abusing the legislation in place.
Americans are just too smart. They're not going to take a poverty job. They're not going to take a job in which they're committed to poverty. And it's not just jobs that you would often put in this category. We're talking about employees of American Airlines and Disney, right in Southern California, are paid so little. They're paid such poverty wages that they're still on government assistance and they're still living in poverty. Wages are too low. One of the contributors to that is excessive immigration.
Right.
And it includes both legal immigration, illegal immigration, as well as the visa, the H-1B and the H-1B visa program.
Several of the visa programs. Yeah. So we're very glad to hear that you're in support of closing those loopholes, capping, looking at the information behind some of the issues and coming down to the real numbers and the real information. We need to make those hard decisions to bring those caps down and to make reforms. Where do you stand on auditing the Fed?
Look, we need wage growth. And we're not, if we continue to do end run around the capitalist system of letting supply and demand meet by importing hundreds of thousands of workers in, wages will never rise, and we're going to lose our middle class democracy. The Fed. I think that the Fed.
I know it's a sticky question, but many people will want to know, so I ask.
I find the Fed has been one of the most destructive forces in America in history. The Fed has engineered a massive upward wealth transfer from the lower and the middle classes to big money special interests and the elites. It's something that if people really understood what had happened, they would be out in the streets. I firmly and strongly believe that the Fed should be audited. And I like to highlight it every opportunity I get. The Fed printed money out of thin air to hand to special interests. Money needed to be injected into the economy during, right in the throes of the credit crisis, and there was an unlimited number of ways that money could have come in. The money could have come in directly through the people. They could have written checks to you, to me, to every worker in this country. Instead, they chose to filter $4 trillion through big money. They gave the money to big money first. I can't think of something more insidious, more un-American, and more worthy of description of theft. So absolutely be audited.
Yeah, thank you for that. Now, we only have another minute or two here, and I just want to say, there's so much hyper around all these issues that come out, and a lot of people about the auditing the Fed or ending the Fed, auditing it especially, say that, the American people can't handle the idea behind the truth about what's going on. I believe that the American people really want to know what's going on. They want to have the information. We live in a day and age where we should have that information, and good, strong decisions should be made. And that's why we want to hire people, patriots, not politicians, veterans who've seen the outside and have really worked to serve the American people in the U.S. Congress. Now, Dan, I want to do a little recap. If you could just let our viewers know your name, where you're running for Congress, and a little bit about your platform, and where they can find more information about your campaign in just like a minute or two, that would be wonderful.
Erin, thanks again. It's been wonderful being on the show. I'm Dan DeBono, seeking office in the 3rd District of New York, which is the North Shore of Long Island and Northeast Queens. And the key part of my platform is to strengthen the middle-class economy, which means increasing job opportunities and increasing wages. And the way that we're going to do it, which is what I learned over 20 years working in finance. We're going to do it by increasing competition among business. We're going to do it by continuing to deregulate, which is a process that the president started, and we're going to do it by fostering small business growth. These things together should help the middle class see upward pressure on their wages and more job opportunities. Other things I'm focused on are to keep us safe physically, which means maintaining an elite military. And I'm also focused on modernizing the infrastructure here in my district, which is primarily the highway system and the Long Island Railroad. And finally, I'm a big protector and proponent of the U.S. Constitution in every aspect. We need to defend it to the end. And the Constitution is under threat in many, many ways. Some of the stuff you read about what's happening on college campuses will just turn you sick. I'm reachable on the internet. I have a website. It's dandebono.com. DEBONO is the way they spell my last name. I'm on Twitter, and I'm pretty active. My handle is @Dan We have a Facebook site, which is Dan DeBono for Congress, and we also have a similarly named page or platform on Instagram. I generally respond to all comments, inquiries within 24 hours. I always tell people I recognize that I know nothing compared to what we all know together. So please give me your ideas, your feedback, your thoughts, and together we can help restore the American dream to what it once was.
Oh, thank you, Dan. Thank you so much for being on the show. I mean, there you have it, folks. He is an American patriot, a family man. He loves his country. He wants to serve. Dan, thank you so much for being on the show. Hopefully you'll come up again on here and tell us and give us more of an update of what's going on specifically in your district and the race as we come up towards the general election. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, Erin.
To hear more and to learn more on how you can make an impact or about the Erin Cruz Show, visit us online at erincruz.com. That's ERINCRUZ.com.